So the first year, in 1995, there was an announcement in the about GOLA, Gallery of Living Art, in the bulletin for anyone who wanted to participate. It was a low-key, we didn't really know what it was at the time, but Mike and I looked at each other during church and said, well, why don't we volunteer? Let's see what it is. But when we went to the casting, there weren't very many people that had volunteered. And I think Joan and Judy were pretty scared about how is this going to work? You know, they still didn't really quite know. That first time that we set up the stage, it transformed the whole front of the church. The curtains were set up on stands. And we got into place. We all had little headpieces that we wore, and it was just really pretty interesting. And we made all of the costumes out of sheets and set everyone up. The kids were all in it. We had a good time. It was a lot of fun. That first time that we were up there and the curtains didn't work, everybody looked at each other, and we just improvised and pushed the curtain shut with a stick and and went on from there. It just excites me every year to get prepared for it. So this year, when I knew we weren't going to be doing it, it was obvious. And I thought, we've got to talk to the congregation and let them know. I know that if I'm missing it, I can't imagine that our other people aren't too. And I wanted to make sure that people knew we're all thinking about it and we're going to do something.
Welcome to this 2021 tribute to Gallery of Living Art. Because of the pandemic, obviously we haven't been able to produce the gallery for a live showing like we would like to, but we wanted to show these pictures as a tribute to this really inspirational program that has helped people in their faith for many years, as we, especially during the season of Lent, walk through Jesus' life. And we're so grateful for all of the people every year from First Lutheran who gather and start in January to produce this and rehearse this and get ready to show whoever would come as a free gift the story of Jesus' life. And this first picture is the triumphal entry. And that's that moment when Jesus comes into Jerusalem riding on a donkey, and the crowds are all around him and laying down their palm branches and their cloaks. And you just think, what were they expecting? You know, why does a crowd come out to see anybody? Why did that crowd come out to see Jesus? They were looking for a Messiah. All of their hopes and dreams, the possibility that this one would fulfill everything that they needed to free them from oppression from Rome, to heal their sick, to show them the way to God. And so you get the sense of that excitement and that drama, even while we know that story is going to change quickly. But I hope you imagine yourself in that crowd as we view this scene and view all of these scenes, and pray that you are blessed.
for the Last Supper every year, and the first year that this happened, Chris Christensen was our director. And the guys sitting at the Last Supper table got an idea to play a joke on Chris. And she was so particular about how everyone's hands were being held, and she would move someone just, fractions of an inch to get them just right. And it took her so long to set that up. And so they were all waiting, and when she finally stepped off the stage, they all got their special costumes on. And that first year, they held up a sign that said JC and the Birkenstock Boys, and they all had their hippie clothes on and different things, sunglasses, and through the years, every year then after that, they would play a similar joke, only do it in a different way. They were playing poker one year, and the year that Pastor Peel retired, they all had Pastor Peel masks on. And when Judy decided to retire, they all had Judy face masks on, and they set the entire table up like a craft room. It's been a lot of fun to see what they're going to come up with next. They keep it a secret. They do a great job of keeping it a secret. Even though Mike, my husband, is involved, I never know what they're going to do. That is one of the funnest parts, I think, for those guys, to be at the table and come up with a different plan each year.
The next picture that we're going to look at today comes from the Last Supper. It's probably one of the most famous pictures in the Western world, one of the most recognizable. It's of Jesus with all of his disciples at the Last Supper, seated at a table. They're all facing kind of one direction, sitting on the same side of the table. And it's the last time that they would dine together before Jesus was taken to trial and then crucified. The painting is said to be based on scripture from John, the 13th chapter, and it really identifies the struggle that might have been happening at the table as they were dining together. That painting is said to portray the different reactions that Jesus' disciples or apostles might have had when they understood what it meant when Jesus said that one of them would betray him. And I think the questions that they had around that table were, "No, not me, Lord. It couldn't be I. Certainly not I." And some, if you look at their faces, were stunned and upset. Some of them were taken aback or had disbelief. Not one of them could possibly do this to Jesus. If you look just over to the third man to the left of Jesus, that is Judas Iscariot, and he's almost in a shadow, and he looks taken aback that his plan had indeed been revealed in that moment. For us, I wonder what it might have been like to sit at that table, to sit in the tension that was with them. What was the conversation they were having that led into Jesus saying, "One of you will betray me on this night"? What would have your reaction been to be told that you would betray him? What would be presumed by those disciples sitting with him who were his friends? They were all friends, colleagues, followers of Jesus. They must have been surprised. They indeed believed that Jesus was the Messiah. And I wonder, was this the plot twist, expected by some and less expected by others, but would lead to the time that Jesus told them earlier, the time was coming when he would leave them. And so he went on to share this meal with them, and in the midst of that meal, he gave them instructions for what it would mean to remember him going forward. Those are still instructions that come to all of us today in the bread and in the wine as we gather around the table with our friends, with our colleagues, and with our fellow disciples to travel with Jesus, to remember Jesus, and even to remember the one who betrays him. That we too come to the table and we receive his grace and his love and his mercy and forgiveness, just as we too may betray Jesus in our daily lives in the sin that we commit. We too are disciples, and we gather with Jesus every time we gather at that table. So as you look at this next picture, think about what it might be like to gather around the table with Jesus and what that means to you each week in the sacrament of Holy Communion.
Then came the day of unleavened bread, on which the Passover lamb had to be sacrificed. So Jesus sent Peter and John, saying,
"Go and prepare the Passover meal for us, that we may eat it."
When the hour came, he took his place at the table, and the apostles with him. He said to them,
I have eagerly desired to eat the Passover with you before I suffer. For I tell you, I will not eat it until it is fulfilled in the kingdom of God."
Then he took a cup, and after giving thanks, he said,
"Take this and divide it amongst yourselves. For I tell you that from now on I will not drink of the fruit of the vine until the kingdom of God comes."
Then he took a loaf of bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it and gave it to them, saying,
"This is my body, which is given for you. Do this in remembrance of me."
And he did the same with the cup after supper, saying,
"This cup that is poured out for you is the new covenant in my blood."
After we had done it for quite a few years, then we were looking for more and more volunteers because we would add more pictures and we would do new scenes, and we were changing everything up. And so Pastor Peel asked our family if we would talk about doing Gallery of Living Art so that we could drum up a few more volunteers, and they were going to hand the microphone to each one of us to speak. And so we each talked about how much fun we had and how interesting it is to get to know other people in the church. And actually that's what when Becky said, I never knew how many people I didn't know at church, and now I know everybody. And I thought that was pretty indicative of just a lot about what Gallery brought to our congregation, was getting to know each other, the camaraderie of performing together. That has always been a real joy for me.
The next picture is Jesus kneeling, as I am now, in the Garden of Gethsemane. And he's thinking about what's coming, thinking about his impending arrest and death. And no longer is he surrounded by crowds. Even his own disciples have fallen asleep and can't stay awake with him to pray. But I think about that relationship Jesus had with the Father, that he was always in conversation with his Father in heaven. He would go into the wilderness to pray and to get direction and to know what's next. And here at the end, he kneels down in the wee hours of the night and he prays. And he prays an honest prayer that teaches us what a relationship with God is like, to be honest about what you're worried about your fears. And Jesus shows his human side when he says, if it's possible, take this cup from me. But then he also shows his obedience to the Father that is an example to us. Not my will, but your will be done. Imagine yourself knowing you are about to die and having that last conversation with your Father in heaven. What would you be feeling? What would you say? What would you hope to hear from God?
Someone's crying in the garden, there beneath the olive trees. Someone's crying in the garden, hear the Savior as he grieves. Father,
think every year when we get ready and we call for our recruiting, and I know several years have happened where we would wait for people to show up, and Judy and I would be there with all of our papers with all of the different scenes and how many people would be in each one, and the number of people that would come in would just be fewer and fewer, and we would panic and we would pray. And God always gave us everybody we needed for all the scenes. And we have come to talk about that a lot, how God brings us everything we need: talent, new voices, new ideas.
This next painting that we'll look at comes from a Hungarian artist. It was painted in the late 19th century. It's a depiction of Jesus in Pilate's court. Pilate is sitting up high on his stand up at the top of the stairs. You'll notice in the background of the picture there are many people who have also gathered behind him for this trial, and they look a little unruly in the picture. It's not their typical courtroom that you would expect to see today. Most of these people in the courtroom are not there to support Jesus as king, but they are there to condemn him. They're there to push Pilate into finding him guilty of crimes that he did not commit. When Jesus was brought in, he was brought from the back of the courtroom. Imagine what it might have been like to be walking into that court and to have a crowd jeering at you and hollering at you from all sides, not quiet and orderly coming to your trial. The tension in the room must have been palpable. Everyone could feel it. Those who were angry and wanted him gone at any cost, and perhaps those who were in the courtroom who knew that he hadn't done anything wrong, those who loved him, but they needed to protect themselves. They went along with the crowd, fearful with what might become of them if they showed their support for Jesus. And then there's Pilate, up in the front, sitting ahead of him, sitting high on the court and looking down on Jesus and asking him questions, trying to find a reason to have him crucified. Pilate needed to release one prisoner from them at the end of this festival time where they had gathered, but everybody in the courtroom was shouting, "Take him away, release Barabbas to us." Barabbas had been thrown into prison for a rebellion in the city and for murder. They wanted Jesus put in jail. They wanted to see Jesus crucified, and they kept shouting in that courtroom. And Pilate asked him for another third time. He said, "Why? What evil has he done? I have found no grounds for sentencing him to death. I will whip him and we will release him." And the crowd kept pressuring, and the tension in the courtroom was rising, demanding that he be crucified, their voices overwhelming. And Pilate recoiled, and he decided what would be demanded of him would be done. He would release Barabbas as they had asked, and he would have Jesus handed over to be crucified. I wonder what Pilate's life might have been like after that time, after he turned over Jesus to the authorities and to be crucified. I wonder for us, what is it like to live in those times where we work against what it is that we know to be true? How can we reconcile ourselves to a God who is for us and to a Jesus who dies for us? How will we reconcile ourselves? That's the question I ask when I look at this picture. And I say, have mercy on us, O God.
Now the men who were holding Jesus began to mock him and beat him. They also blindfolded him and kept asking him,
"Prophesy, who is it that struck you?"
They kept heaping many other insults on him. When day came, the assembly of the elders of the people, both chief priests and scribes, gathered together, and they brought him to their council. They said, "If you are the Messiah, tell us."
If I tell you, you will not believe. And if I question you, you will not answer. But from now on, the Son of Man will be seated at the right hand of the power of God.
Then they said, "What further testimony do we need? We have heard it ourselves from his own lips." Then the assembly rose as a body and brought Jesus before Pilate. They began to accuse him, saying,
"We found this man perverting our nation, forbidding us to pay taxes to the emperor, and saying that he himself is the Messiah, a king."
Now Jesus stood before the governor, and the governor asked him,
"Are you the king of the Jews?"
You say so.
but when he was accused by the chief priests and the elders, he did not answer. Then Pilate said to him,
"Do you not hear how many accusations they make against you?"
but he gave no answer, not even to a single charge, so that the governor was greatly amazed.
As years went by and we added new scenes and more things, and we talked about doing the Pieta for the first time and what that would be like. And we created that just out of a photograph and out of our head, and decided to put clown white makeup on the players. The first time we did that, I think the kids who did it, they couldn't believe how hard it was to clean that off. And they got back there behind the curtain. The first time that the curtains opened, the entire church just was an audible sigh, because they just couldn't believe how beautiful it really was. That scene is one of my favorites to this day. So in the beginning, when we cast everyone, what I want them to feel is just what it was like at that moment in that painting for the role that they play, and whether they're at the Last Supper table right when Jesus says, "One of you will betray me," to the end when the angel is holding her hand up in the air. And each special part is such a part of the story. For those feelings and for people to play those parts and those roles, it really puts the Easter story together, and I really like that part.
The next scene is the crucifixion, the hardest scene to watch, certainly the hardest one to feel. But the gospel writers all point our attention toward the cross. They don't want us to look away as much as we'd like to. And so you have to think about everything that took place leading up to Jesus being nailed to a beam of wood, being lifted up naked in front of everybody, humiliated while people were jeering at him, telling him to save himself. All the while he's dying, he's bleeding, he's suffering. Even the thieves on the cross were telling him to save them. One looks to him with faith, and Jesus says, "Truly today you'll be with me in paradise." And you think about that Jesus on the cross wasn't just thinking about his own suffering and his own pain, but he was thinking about others. "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they're doing. You'll be with me today in paradise. John, here is your mother. Take care of her." The crucifixion helps us to know God's love for us, that Jesus would do anything for us. So as you look at the cross again and think of Jesus' death and suffering, know that he did it for you. Repeat that in your mind. This is for me. For me. Jesus died for me.
Oh, to see the dawn of the
There's lots of different depictions of this particular scene of the women at the tomb. There's an angel next to them. There have been many created over the centuries, but this one will look similar to most of them. It has the angel outside of the tomb and the women sitting almost at her feet looking into that empty tomb. It's here that we come to celebrate the first resurrection, that Jesus has risen and the tomb is empty. But at first look, I wonder what the women must have thought about that empty tomb. Perhaps we would wonder, where is his body? What has happened to Jesus? Have those who put him here in the first place perhaps come and taken his body? Perhaps thinking those who had crucified him or feared him, maybe they were up to no good before that Easter morning. But this is not the case. The angel comes and she says to the women, "Do not be afraid." Words we've heard from angels before. "For I know that you are looking for Jesus who was crucified. He is not here. He has risen. Come and see the place where he laid, and then go quickly and tell his disciples, he is risen from the dead, and he is going ahead to Galilee. There you will see him, and now I have told you." And so the women hurry away from the tomb, afraid yet filled with joy as they run to tell the disciples. These women would become the first to see the risen Lord, and they must have been pretty nervous about the whole thing, greeted by an angel, told that Jesus was back. Really, it was the worst turned into the best in one resurrection morning. What joy it brought, what excitement. What new life did that resurrection hold for these women and for each of us? So off they went to tell the others that Jesus was back for them and that he would meet them where they are. They got to be messengers of the good news and the first disciples to share of Jesus' resurrection. And this was the dawning of a new day.
On the third day, at the rising of the sun, there came those who loved him, seeking him who died, Christ the crucified. On the third day, on the third day, on the third day, they found the stone was rolled away, and they entered the tomb to see him, seeing him who died, Christ the crucified. On the third day, on the third day. And an angel said unto them,
I'll never forget one year when Diana Keys used to be backstage helping with all of the costuming and getting people prepared and ready. And Bill Lipscomb was in a scene where really all he was wearing was pretty much a loincloth. And she was back there helping him get his makeup straight and get everything on and wrapped. And he was so funny, and he made a joke, and Diana laughed, and this cough drop she had in her mouth just went bloop right into the loincloth. And they both looked at each other and went, and she goes, "I'm not going after that."